warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hey everyone, this is Atina and
This is Hasan.
we are from Department of Statistics, Universitas Islam Indonesia. And right now we are listening to the Statistics and Bioinformatics Research Center podcast. And this podcast will bring you gain understanding and insight, especially from the bioinformatics research area, from the expert around the world. Okay, today we have a guest from Malaysia, Professor Khang Tsung Fei. Okay, he is a professor in University Malaya, Malaysia.
And for your information, University Malaya is ranked 65th in the QS World University Ranking in 2022 and 8th in Asia. And also, Professor Khang is one of the lecturers at the Institute of Mathematical Science at the Faculty of Science. His research interest is cover the area of data scientists, machine learning, bioinformatics, ecological, and also medical statistics.
Okay, in today's podcast, we will discuss about the research and careers in statistics of Professor Khang. Good afternoon, Professor Khang.
Hi, good afternoon.
Okay, thank you for joining us. And first, we would like to thanks to you for accepting our invitation. How are you today?
I feel great.
Okay. So I think you enjoy Indonesia situation. Okay, so it was your first time coming to Indonesia?
No, I've been to Indonesia for a few times, but this is my first time in Jogja.
Okay, so what your idea about Yogyakarta?
So you have a really big airport.
Yeah.
Okay, a new and big airport, but I haven't seen the town much. So because I've just been quite busy with the visit, but the campus looks quite nice. So I think maybe in the weekends I'll find out more about the city. Yeah.
Thank you for your.
But it looks very promising.
Okay.
Okay, Professor. Now we would like ask you about your background, especially before coming into further, and talk about the application in the bioinformatics. When you are a computer scientist or statistician, how do you get into this field, the bioinformatics field, and also the medical field? How do you get into it?
Okay. Well, I guess the first thing is you need to have some curiosity, right?
Yeah, of course.
Because I think a lot of times, and I think at least in this part of the world, people do computer science or they do statistics because they hate biology.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of mental compartmentalization, right? They don't want to touch anything that's related to biology. So they just want to work on numbers like abstract models and all that. So this sort of thing is like, I think this is the main barrier. It's like a baggage that they get from somehow the system. If you look at countries in the West, they don't have this baggage. In fact, you find that a lot of the bioinformatics work is the breakthroughs in bioinformatics, they were actually done by people from mathematics or statistics. And I think it has got something to do with their education. I think especially if you look at the US, they have liberal arts education. And they don't kind of like go too specialized into some direction. So your undergraduate study could be in anything, and it's very liberal. You can take like mix a lot of stuff. So I think that keeps them very curious. All right, and later as they have studied, like they have got their PhD and all that, so they are constantly looking for new problems to work on. So and a lot of these people they would just over their maybe the faculty has a place where they have coffee, they just like say hi and what are you working on, can you tell me a little bit. It's just over conversation like this, and they sort of start to develop some kind of curiosity, and they just maybe invite them to have a look at the data. And I think a lot of their kind of like entry into these fields are because of these activities. In fact, there are a lot of these statisticians who know absolutely zero about molecular biology.
Yeah.
And after they spend 2 years, they become like the leading person in that area, which is very amazing in my opinion. So I think the first thing that people need to get rid of is just unlearn all the old things that have been following you. Just keep an open mind.
Yeah.
So what is the motivation? Why are you curious at this specific field? There are some other field, but why are you
why am
choose
I
this one?
curious? Actually, I liked biology. Okay, and I was very kind of like I did very well for my biology, right? And in middle school, so and for maths I was okay, but I was not very outstanding in it. But my biology was like pretty good. So I was at that time I think it was the I was interested in the more kind of like modern aspect of biology, which is molecular biology, right? Because at that time it was around the end of 1990, so I guess around that time. So then I decided that this is really interesting, and I should study more about genetics and molecular biology. So that's why I chose to study have my undergraduate training in that subject. And I think it was a correct decision because it turns out that actually if you talk about genetics, that there are actually a lot of models, statistical ideas inside there, and I think that after I studied that, I noticed that there were a lot of these things, and I think that made me kind of like want to study mathematics more, rather than just studying mathematics by itself. But I said I want to understand these things, so I said like okay, so I can go back to the maths and study that again.
So yes, I know that you have a bachelor degree at molecular biology, and you got a doctoral program and master program in statistics.
Yeah.
That's why you are learn more statistics and mathematics, but still interested in biology, right? Right to this time, still interested in biology, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, like that's my natural interest to know about how life actually works. And I think it's just nice to combine it with statistics, because when you study all these things about life, there's a lot of uncertainty, and statistics is just the correct way to look at things. So I think otherwise, because I like to study life at the macro level, like a process level. So I think without mathematics or statistics, you can't really do that. So it's just a nice combination.
Okay. Okay, great answer, Mr. K. Maybe Miss Atina want to ask the next question.
Yeah.
Okay, so for now, what project are you passionate about? The most
Passionate?
Yeah.
Okay. I actually have two projects at the moment. So one is with my I've recently got some collaborators. They are like entomologists. So I think we're working on some kind of machine learning project on we take the wing of the fly. The wing of the fly has got some veins, some patterns. So we want to use like the image of the wing to predict the species of the fly, and these flies would be those that are used for forensic studies. Like for example, like certain species they colonize dead bodies. Like there's a sequence of colonization. So Of course, you could get an expert to identify the fly and all that, but we are just wondering, like, is there enough information just on the wing, and we can use computational methods to just predict its species. So this is just a nice machine learning problem, and we do get a lot of very good samples from entomologists in Malaysia and also from overseas. And applying this machine learning work in this area is a new area. Okay, although machine learning as a whole is like by itself it's been around for a long time, but you have to think about the penetration, right, of this techniques into different disciplines in biology. So I think there is a lot of scope to work on. Like I think some people might think that, oh, machine learning, everything has been done, like there's nothing else to do. No, it's not like that. You know the techniques and all that, but different other domain knowledge, they might be like just at the beginning. And if you collaborate with these people, you will develop the first papers in that field, and that can have a great impact on that field. So I think there's a lot of scope for that. So try to identify that, right? The other project is with my PhD students. So we do some methodological developments on analysis, especially like we are trying to develop statistical methods that can actually detect genes that have large variation, like in between different conditions, right? So some genes, if under certain disease condition, they lose their ability to become regulated, so they will have large variance. So it's a problem of detecting variance with RNA-seq data. And I think recently, so we were very fortunate that we came across, like, I think a framework that people haven't thought about, and we got some really nice results. And so the student is like working very hard on it, and I think we might get some pretty nice papers out of that. So I think that is something that there's a bit of luck involved, but the student was also very hardworking, so we managed to get some really exciting things.
So actually you are working in two areas, I can say that, in application and then in the development of the theory.
That's right.
Yeah, it is very interesting, I think. Okay, so I have done a search about you. Can you briefly explain about the computational genomics and what magic is behind it?
Computational genomics. Well, it's about all this application of computational methods, right, on genomic data, and people usually use this to solve some types of problems. For example, they want to predict promoter, like whether a particular sequence contains any promoters, right? Promoters would be a particular sequence that regulates the expression of a gene. They might want to develop hidden Markov models because your observed data would be just DNA sequence, and they want to find out, like, they want to train the model with examples of where genes are, okay, the content of the gene, right? They train it with examples of gene sequences, and then train it with examples of non-gene examples. So then they have some novel data they want to predict, right? Which sections are genic. So then they can actually let the biologist know. The biologist will have to do some experiments to verify that, right? And of course, computational genomics is also concerned with using DNA sequence data to study things like phylogeny, like phylogenetics. You want to study the relationship of animals, plants, generally living things, or you can even use that to study viruses, right? How the different viruses kind of like evolve from one another. Like for example, you talk about COVID-19, you want to start from like all the strains and all that. It basically everything started from the first case in Wuhan, right, in China. That is the ancestor species. That's an ancestor virus. Then it undergoes mutation and it then becomes different variants like Delta, Omicron, or whatever. But they all have their ancestor there. So it doesn't just suddenly appear. They all have. That's like they can trace it back to some ancestor, right? So computational genomics is also about like how do you use DNA sequence data to build this kind of trees to talk about their relatedness. Yeah, and you can use that information to pinpoint the origin of the disease or how the virus actually spreads around the globe. Yeah.
So I think we should have to cooperate with the expert in the certain areas, like biologists or entomologists or
definitely.
But parasitologists, I think.
Yeah, anything. In fact, because they are the ones who have the data, and as you know, like statistics, when you want to, I think the beauty of statistics is in how you have interaction with the domain, the context of the data. By itself, if you just look at the methods, there's nothing interesting.
Yeah.
If you ask the mathematicians, they'll say that your models are trivial.
Yeah.
They say they are not interested, right? But the magic is that you have to, if you tie it up with the context, then things becomes interesting because how you use certain things will depend on the context, right? And how you develop certain methodology and all that, it has to take the context into consideration. So I think that is the part that makes statistics interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your great answer. So maybe next, Pak Hasan.
Okay. From what I learned, bioinformatics nowadays face a great challenge, especially to solve the problem at genomic problem, especially when there's some pandemic period on COVID-19 with some its variation. How we get insight from those fields in order to solve that problem?
Okay, so so nowadays a lot of these sequence data, they are available in public databases like in CBI and all that, right? So if you have some kind of hypothesis, right, you could develop your own hypothesis and you could look for these sequences in the databases and you could download them and then you could start playing with them. But usually you probably might need to talk about this with maybe just discuss it with someone with genomics background, just to because the way you'll see things will be usually kind of like constrained by your own personal experience, right? So you may not have viewed the problem in a way that is correct. So even though the data is lying around, simply kind of like collecting it and trying to analyze it without kind of like having some domain knowledge will usually not result in much progress. So I think the main difficulty may be like finding someone who is willing to talk to you. Because you can, I mean, like randomly emailing strangers is a little bit not so productive, right? Like it might just, people, if they don't know you, it might just go to the trash bin, and I think this is the hardest part. That's why it helps if people can go to conferences and whether online or preferably physical, but online is like, people kind of like, it's a little bit hard to interact online. I think talking to people, like finding the right people to talk to and all that is I think the more challenging part.
Yes, I'm agree that looking for that particular person is not easy because some people is still hard to find the relation between statistics and biology, something like that.
That's
So
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
it's very rare to see those person. Okay, next from Miss Atina.
Okay, so maybe you can tell us about your point of view, how the biological data and the statistical model will be beneficial for human and environmental beings, maybe.
Okay. I think one of the area where you can see this very clearly is microbiome studies. Maybe I heard of that before. Microbiomes would be the bacteria, the collection of bacteria that lives on an organism. So we can talk about the gut microbiome, the skin microbiome, the what other microbiome? The microbiome on your hands or wherever, right? On your mouth, right? Even in our mouth, we have microbiome. It's naturally occurring, okay? And the study of these microbiomes, how they interact with one another and how they are associated with certain diseases, is a very rapid area of development where you do need to use a lot of statistical methods and bioinformatics methods, because bioinformatics methods would be they do the some kind of gene markers, like for example 16S markers. They will sequence that from the samples, for example from the stool samples. So they indirectly infer the presence of certain bacteria in our guts based on the sequence. So you can imagine like you have a lot of short reads and you have to assemble them into some longer reads, all right, and that will map to some database to retrieve the sequence, the species identity. Then you know the bacteria, which bacteria is present, and then you can count how many times they have appeared in the sample. And from there, from the raw data, you want to develop a statistical model to figure out like which set of these microorganisms are associated. Of course, some of them will be higher, some of them will be lower in terms of their abundance with respect to some medical condition, right? Whether you are obese, you are normal and all that, the gut microbiota is different. But there will be difference. But whether the difference is statistically significant, now you see the statistics comes in and you got to use statistical methods to figure out like, oh, this difference, no, there's nothing there. Oh, this difference is the one that cannot be explained by chance. So then you take out the set of the bacteria, and that bacteria you can be very useful. It can have some impact on health. Like for example, it is known that people who have certain kind of bacteria, they are protected from some illnesses in like gut illnesses, and especially and this has led to some very important understanding. I'm sure you have heard of some common medical advice, which is if you eat a lot of red meat, your risk factor for heart disease will go up, and also colon cancer. Yeah. Okay, but you eat a diet that is more enriched in nuts, vegetables, green leafy vegetables, then the risk factor for colon cancer will be, the risk will be actually lower. For a long time, this was just an association from statistics, but I think we already know why now. The reason is from this microbiome studies, they already found that those bacteria that for people who eat a lot of meat, their gut microbiome is of a certain type. And from the domain knowledge of this bacteria, they know that they produce molecules that cause low-grade inflammation. So your gut is continuously under stress because of the compounds that's being released by this bacteria. So it is causing low-grade inflammation. And it's also well known that if our cells are always getting inflammation, it will induce mutations and it will later become cancerous. So we know that it's because of this pet bacteria. It's causing low-grade inflammation, which eventually leads to cancer. So now we know the whole story, right? And I find that very interesting because it allows you to manipulate your gut. You can change the way you eat, and there might be some other like more kind of like unusual thinking, which is like they will purify the bacteria. That's a good bacteria. Maybe they're packaged in the pill, and they just let you take it. Maybe in the future, it's the bacteria pill to colonize your gut. We actually already have that in terms of lactobacillus. But I think lactobacillus is just like very well established. But now they are trying to look for more kind of like refined ones. Like some people they can keep on eating, but they will never get fat. Right? It's got something to do with many things, and a lot of people think it's because of genetics. That could be the reason, but increasingly it's also because of the gut microbiota. If that person has some gut microbiota that helps them kind of like maintain the body weight even if they eat so much, then it might be worth like knowing what are these things, and you can sell the pill and say, after you take this, you can eat whatever much you want. Maybe something like that. So there are a lot of possibilities. I think this is one aspect where there is a lot of, you can see very clearly that the interplay with bioinformatics, with statistics, and finally it might translate to some even some health products or even some guide on how to behave with your diet. So like for example, the traditional diet is very well known to be very good for the gut. The modern Western diet, if you can avoid it because it's not as good as the traditional ones. The traditional ones are very protective for the gut.
Yes, I think it will be very beneficial, especially for the medical areas, to make a right decision toward some or certain maybe disease or the other part that you mentioned before. So maybe from this explanation, we can draw a conclusion that bioinformatics it will be very beneficial, especially in the medical areas.
In fact, you cannot do much of the modern medicine without bioinformatics. I think simply it's because sequence data has become such an important source of data. Same with gene expression, same with protein data. So you can't run away from that anymore. So bioinformatics is the area where you learn all the tools, the methods to deal with such kind of data.
Moreover, statistics can predict something.
The statistics will be needed to handle the uncertainties in the models. For sure.
Okay. Next, Mr. Hasan.
You said that the sequence data is nowadays is everywhere, something like that, and not just sequence data, but all of the data in the world. Is it a challenge or a threat in the bioinformatics fields? Those kind of conditions where the data are massive, but the analysis is so hard to do, and so few people who can analyze it.
One of the challenge will be one of the, I think the dangers might be that it will just basically only a very limited set of players will be able to fully utilize these things, and that I think will create a gap between those who know how to use these things and those who are like left behind. So and these gaps may translate to again to like inequalities in terms of economy and all that. So yeah, it's like once you are kind of like in ahead, you basically have the benefit of scale and manpower, and the others cannot catch up. They just can't catch up. There's no hope. And then you end up dominating the field. And then any kind of commercialization, all that, you are the one who is taking it. So I think that is the main problem. For it's not an equal situation where everyone can actually contribute. I don't think it's like that, because there are a lot of constraints in terms of manpower, resources, and all that. And like for developing countries, it will be a bit of a struggle. But I think the part where developing countries might also, why despite this you might still want to invest in this area, is because the biodiversity resource is concentrated in the developing countries. So you hold you're holding all these things, right? So they can. I mean, like at most, maybe the developed countries, if they want to get hold of this, they have to collaborate with you. So they have to have knowledge transfer and technical transfer. Then you can agree to some collaboration, because you will transfer the technical knowledge, so you can catch up, or maybe kind of like prosper together and something like that. So I think this might be one thing that the developing countries need to be serious about. That your biodiversity is very, it's worth a lot of money, and don't destroy it, please. Because the problem with developing countries is that they cannot see the long term. They just want to get the short term return. So they maybe do a lot of logging. You destroy, you cut the forest down there, whereas that might cause extinction and things like that. So just for short term kind of return, like okay, you can sell some wood, but in the long term you already lost the biodiversity, which is maybe even more important, maybe the kind of products that it can produce. Like if you can develop into a drug, it's better than a gold mine. Right? I mean, like as long as there are people, it's better than a gold mine. That's my opinion.
So can we say that there's a few players, but actually when we expert in this field, because of the few players, actually it can become our chance, because there are no other player or other people who is understand this field, especially in the developed country, right? Something like that. Okay. Next, Miss Atina.